I learned to hear London, or what passed for it here, by the sound a loaf makes when it decides to be bread. Tap the bottom, listen for the hollow thump. If it answers like a door, it's done. That same thump told me when a bridge was clear, when a patrol grew bored, when a boat would be waiting under the mill. My timer had two faces: minutes for the gendarmes, messages for the men who didn't wear uniforms but did the dangerous work anyway. I set it to 45 when the road to the cloister slept, 32 when the square woke early. No one suspects a woman who fusses about crust. They came to my kitchen the way hunger comes, quietly, and then all at once. Widows with rationed books soft from rain. A boy who smelled of axle grease and questions. A priest who kept his hat on because he'd given his hair to worry. I weighed flour like a judge adding up sins, pinched salt between fingers that remembered baptismal fonts and cellar doors. Out loud I recited harmless domesticities. 2 cups, a scant teaspoon. Bake at 180. Underneath, the recipe was a map. 2 cups meant 2 couriers moving, no more. Scant meant trim your route. 180 meant river path. The wind is with you. I never wrote that part down. The paper always ends up in someone else's hands. The Germans, when they came as customers. One liked rye because it reminded him of Sundays before he learned how to point. Another bought sweet rolls and left them untouched on the paper, proof that men who order sugar have forgotten what it is for. They inspected the back room once and found only kneading bowls, proving they knew as little about kitchens as they knew about towns. Flour hides more than fingerprints. It hides intent. A dusting on the counter, and the world forgives you for being busy. At 9 each morning, I put a small card in the window. Tart AUX poems augured we, and moved the accent when the bridge was watched. Over the U meant wait until dusk. Over the O meant go by roofs. A schoolmistress was the first to notice. She never spoke to me about it. She started buying bread on the days that needed brave people in sensible shoes. The resistance doesn't look like cinema. It looks like women with baskets and men who say please. Butter talks if you listen. When it sighs into flour and becomes crumbs the size of peas, it means roof tiles won't slip tonight. When it smears because the kitchen is too warm, someone has been asking names in the square. I kept my room cool with stubborn windows and lies. The pastry won't forgive heat. I'd scold, and the gendarme with the poet's mustache would step back, ashamed to be weather. He liked to watch my hands. Men imagine women's hands can't count beyond teaspoons. Mine kept a whole town's arithmetic. Cups, minutes, streets, men to move, one woman to stop. The ovens were twin saints. Left oven meant North Quay, right meant market. If I slid a tray onto the top rack, it told the couriers to take roofs. Middle rack meant alleys. Bottom meant cellars, stay down. Even my egg wash carried grammar. A pale glaze said brisk and quiet. Dark shine said linger until bells. When I brushed the edges twice, it warned of a dog that knows despair by smell. The boy with axle grease learned to watch the shine. He'd tilt his head like a sparrow and leave without bread if the crust gleamed too much. At the back table I kept a notebook for orders. Names were dishes: Madame, 2 loaves, 1 with sesame, 2 people, take the mill, Father R. Rye, not sliced. Ripe you only, no questions. Jacques, 6 petit pains, lightly scored, 6 stops, short rests. If anyone lifted the book, they'd find a pantry list written in the good handwriting nuns beat into me. The pantry list was true, just not complete. Truth, like pastry, is a matter of layers. At noon, while the square argued over turnips, I cooled trays on the sill. Steam makes the windows we need. On fogged glass, I traced a circle for go, a line for wait, a cross for not tonight. To a hungry town, it looked like Greece. To the women with baskets, it was weather. They'd pause, dab a finger as if testing crispness, and nod to the air. We never waved. Waving is for flags and men with hats. Sundays I baked angel food I don't believe in, all egg whites and patience. The batter's lift told me if the cloister lane would lift us too. When it fell, I wrote a different menu in my head. Soup thick enough to keep people home. Stay home is a recipe no one applauds, so I served it with extra butter and called it charity. Charity is obedience with better manners. The recipes themselves turn traitor to paper and loyal to people. Bake at 180 degrees Celsius for 25 minutes. Mint bridge at dusk. Leave by roofs after the second bell. Add a splash of milk. Mint take the mill road if you hear boots. Let rest before slicing meant do not boast. If you live, the town will know without your mouth helping. I taught 2 girls from the school to copy my recipes exactly wrong in the same way, down to the flour smudge after salt. If a card was found, the occupation would learn only that my pastry was inconsistent. Sometimes a soldier bought a tart and asked for the secret. I told him the truth. Cold butter, steady hands, no shortcuts. He nodded, pleased to be let into the mysteries of women. He never asked why my timer buzzed in 3 shorts and 1 long the same way every time he mentioned the bridge. He thought ovens make random complaints. Ovens, like women, have better reasons than men assume. That night, with the timer set to 45 and the left oven taking all the work, a knock came soft as flour. The schoolmistress stood there with her scarf tied like seriousness. For the parish, she said, which is how we pay debts. I slid her a loaf marked with 3 barely there scores, quay, cloister, mill, and a paper cone of cinnamon that was not cinnamon at all. She did not look at the marks. She never does. Good women learn not to look at the things that must travel under their hands. I reset the timer to 32. Somewhere, the boy with axle grease would hear it as clearly as bells. Somewhere, a priest would count cupboards instead of sins. Somewhere, a woman would boil milk until it told her to wait. I wiped the counter with a cloth that always forgave me, turned the sign in the window, and watched the town read my kitchen like a page it had memorized. Ciphers should taste like nothing. If you flavor them, men with hats develop appetites. Mine lived where housewives keep their pride, at the top of the recipe card, where we write yield, pan size, oven, time. Yield told the network how many bodies could move. Pan size told them the street. Oven told them north or south. Time told them when wind, bells, or boredom would be on our side. The card for tart AUX poems read, demure as a nun, yield, for, pan, 20 centimeters, oven, left. Time, 45. To a hungry woman, that is pie for 4. To a courier, that is move 4 people. Through the 20-meter lane by the Cooper, North Quay, just before curfew. Ordinary is the best encryption because tyrants can't afford to study it. Units had dialects. Cups were townspeople. Grams were strangers or fighters passing through. When I wrote 2 cups flour, 75 g sugar, I meant 2 locals escort. Fighter travels alone behind. No greetings. Teaspoons meant watchers. Tablespoons meant the men who interrogate. 1 teaspoon salt at the start of ingredients meant 1 guard visible. His post early in the route. At the end it meant he circles back late. Don't be there to admire him. If I wrote level teaspoon, that officer did his job like a clerk, predictable. Heaping meant he enjoyed it, dangerous, but bribable with flattery or hot bread. Temperatures mapped to paths. 160 degrees Celsius, low, meant cellars. 175 to 180 degrees Celsius, moderate, meant alleys. 200 degrees Celsius, hot, meant roofs. If I added fan, a setting these ovens don't truly have, it meant wind favors sound. No singing hinges, oil them. Preheat meant scout first. Start in a cold oven meant move cold. No testing with knocks. Reduce heat after 10 minutes was split the group after first corner. Decoy left, life right. Order of operations was choreography. Cream butter and sugar meant pair up and make noise like neighbors who approve of each other. Cut in butter meant approach without speaking and leave without looking back. Fold in whites meant bring in the ones who must stay light on roofs. Rest the dough meant don't boast when it works. A sentence like, work quickly, do not overmix, meant no more than 2 doors. Third door is a question you cannot answer. Shapes carried quiet. Round pans were the cloister, rectangles the mill. Anything free-form was the roofs. If I wrote crimp edges, it meant avoid the square's outer turn where cobbles catch feet. Dock the pastry, poke with a fork, meant 3 soft knocks at the sacristy, then stillness. Blind bake with beans meant women only, children under coats. Men wait for second bell. I kept a jar of old beans that had learned patience. They never complained at being heroes. I never trusted icing. It is vanity in sugar. But I used glaze. Apricot glaze meant safe if sweet. Bring bread to bribe a cook in uniform. Milk glaze meant refuse wine and talk about weather. No glaze meant do not speak to anyone who asked you for the time. Sprinkle was posted child at the corner. Dust was let gossip settle before you cross. If I wrote generously, it meant someone is hungry enough to confess. choose kindness. On the back of the card, where housewives write inferior variations, I kept the part of the town a man could die for. Substitutions. Butter lard meant if the bridge fails, take the quay. Apples pears meant if soldiers at market, go to the cloister steps. Yeast baking powder meant if no priest, use the postmistress. Shorter line, same absolution. I taught 2 girls to copy my errors faithfully. My habitual smudge after salt. My way of underlining cool completely when what I meant was wait until the second bell. Handwriting is a passport. We forged mine to keep from forging others. I printed timers I did not own. Bake 25 to 28 minutes meant leave within 3 of the clock's second bell. Bake exactly 32 meant when my oven rings thrice and once move. The boy with axle grease tuned his ear to my kitchen like it was a wireless. Men who fix things understand that rhythm is a kind of map. He could hear which oven door I opened by the tone of the hinge and know if we were going north or keeping to alleys. When the prefect's nephew bought pastries to impress girls, I gave him meringues, sugar that collapses if you breathe on it too hard. He called them pure. They require patience, I said, and did not add, and the willingness to stop beating at the right moment. Tyrants don't know how to stop beating. That's why meringues betray them. I kept the cipher portable. A copy of La Cuisinière de la Campagne had a hollow cut into its spine where 3 half-cards slept. Quay, mill, cloister. Slip 1 into a loaf, and any woman could bake intelligence into a morning. Slip 2, and a man might think dinner required him to live. If a soldier ever leafed my book, he found stains where cookbooks confess their virtue. Butter at sauces, flour at cakes. A burn I learned on wartime sugar. A nation can hide in stains if it must. At the bottom of every card, beneath the lie called notes, I wrote the inventory I will never show. Hands to move, 4. Doors that forget themselves, 2. Dog who knows despair, still posted. Wind from the west, good for roofs, bad for boats. Pride, sifted. Fear, beaten but not overmixed. Then I turned the card over and made dinner for a town that needed to pretend recipes were only recipes. A good cipher forgives clumsy hands. I built checksums into lunch. If a recipe said salt, then sugar, but I measured sugar first in front of you. It meant abort and return the way you came. If I tapped the rim of the tin twice before pouring batter, it confirmed North Quay, once long meant cloister. The backup lived in the garnish. A single bay leaf tucked under twine said 1 courier only. 2 cross said pair, staggered by a door. If we were watched, I'd forget the bay and dust with paprika instead. Red dots in a diagonal for roofs, horizontal for alleys, none for cellars. You can wipe paprika off with a sleeve and the town forgives you for clumsiness. Packaging spoke louder than pastry. I tied twine knots the way sailors keep secrets. Square knot, market, clove hitch, mill, bowlin, quay. If I finished with the tails tucked, take women and children. Tails loose, men only. Tails trimmed short. You are already late, go. Paper itself had dialects. Brown grocer paper meant safe routes. Butcher's sheet meant expect dogs. Newspaper wrap meant talk loudly about politics and be boring while you pass the corner. I kept a drawer of clippings whose headlines had learned to lie in useful directions. Spices made sentences. Cinnamon meant priest. Nutmeg meant postmistress. Anise meant the schoolmistress with the sensible shoes. When I said, try the cinnamon today, it traveled well. I meant confess geography, not sins. Vanilla was hospital. Rare, precious, carried only when an injured man required a bed that didn't ask questions. If I said no spice, it meant do not recruit. Let the day be small and survivable. We rehearsed error. New couriers learned to order wrong on purpose. Rye sliced thin, they'd ask. If the day was roofs, I would refuse the slicer, blades dull, and hand over a whole loaf. Do not slice your route into pieces the city cannot defend. If the day was cellars, I'd slice too thin and the crumbs would telegraph, do not leave tracks. The boy with axle grease learned to crumble bread for pigeons as he went. Pigeons are our archivists, untidy and incorruptible. Menus carried parity bits, tiny redundancies that catch liars. Chalked soup du jour, pain du cloister, meant cloister path green. If I underlined soup and not pain, it negated the route. Don't trust the cloister after all. I shifted the accent aigu and augured hui to mark timing. Over the A, early, Over the usual, missing, late. A gendarme once asked why my accents wandered. Because I cannot spell when I'm hungry. I told him, a truth that made him generous. My shopping lists were the safest ledger in town. Flour, eggs, salt, apples, for items meant 4 turns. 5th item appears only if a patrol shifts. If I added candles with a tick beside it, the mill kept a boat ready. If I wrote soap twice, the rail yard had a sympathetic porter. On market days, I let the list peek from my apron. Widows would read, nod, and become errands the way bread becomes hunger answered. The oven timers had a duet. Bell for go, my wooden spoon for confirm. 3 taps on the bench, quiet as prayers, meant message acknowledged. A scraped circle in flour meant repeat back. Couriers repeated by ordering. 2 tarts, medium crust, no glaze, which echoed 2 people, alleys, speak to no one. I boxed their order and their courage together, then tucked under the twine a slip no soldier would keep, a clean recipe card, so the men had something to destroy at the corner if the day turned. For long nights, I baked brioche no one could afford. The enriched dough rises slowly, so do escapes. Need 10 minutes. Wait for second bell. Chill 1 hour. Go home. We will try tomorrow. Proof until doubled. Only when you can smell rain on the stones. The gloss on top was theology. Pale. God is bored, good. Dark. He is interested. Go carefully. Burnt. Go nowhere. Tea for everyone. And tell them the butter was stubborn. The town believed in my butter. It saved more men than sermons. For messages that must survive heat, I use things ovens respect. Scoring, slashes, vents. 3 slashes on a round loaf, set closely, meant 3 turns within a small radius. Patrols are circling. A single long slash on a batten meant 1 decisive turn. Do not linger at corners. On free-form galettes, I cut vents in patterns. Triangles for cloister, diamonds for market, crescents for quay. If a patrol stopped you, you could plead vanity. Pretty pies sell. Vanity is a uniform everyone understands. When paper became dangerous, starch became ink. I simmered flour plus water to a clear gel, dragged a stiff brush across the underside of a bakery label, and wrote routes you could not see until the paper warmed above a kettle. I taught the postmistress to dry her hands, over steam exactly long enough to read 2 words, roost tonight, and then press the label to the brown paper, sealing scents under twine. If a search pulled it loose, it read as a smudge. If a friend steamed it again, it spoke. Seeds were numerals. Poppy marked 1, sesame 2, caraway 3, flax 4, anise 5. A 2, 3, 1 sprinkle along the crust rim said market, mill quay. For quantity, I salted the heel. Pinches at north, east, south, west, 1 to 4 couriers. Soldiers love their own boots too much to study heels. Widows buy the heel because it is cheaper and keeps better. In this town, economy is a courier service. Ration stamps let me write novels in abbreviations. If I clipped a corner of bread ration B, 12, it meant checkpoint 12 counts loaf corners, avoid. If I overpunched sugar by 1 hole, it translated to add 1 body to the route, safe hands available. I kept a stamp pad that bled. The blur over meat on a Tuesday meant dogs restless, find roofs. A gendarme once asked why my stamps were messy. Wartime ink. I sighed and handed him a clean roll for home. We used mistakes as parachutes. If I accidentally set a menu board letter crooked, tart AUX poems with a shy M, the town knew mill had moved. If I left chalk dust on the sill, the cloister door would be kind. No dust, the square would be cruel. I learned to drop a wooden spoon at exactly the wrong time to cover the right person leaving. Kitchens are theaters where sound is seasoning. Spoon on tile for move, ladle on pot rim for delay, knife flat on board for go home. Fermentation kept our calendar. A poolish that puffed in 1 hour meant the evening wind took messages over roofs. If it sulked 90 minutes, the river was sulking too. Sourdough taught me patience. Feed at dawn, scout. Fold at noon, adjust. Shape at dusk, commit. Bake at night, go. I could smell a curfew change by the way bubbles rose. Authority tweaks time. Dough tells on it. The boy with axle grease teased me for sniffing bowls. Engines talk, I told him. So does yeast. Both dislike fools. For couriers who couldn't read cards or measure, I hid routes and taste. A tart with too much lemon meant avoid the square, tongues will wag. A loaf with undersalt meant dogs posted, take cellars. A sweet roll with more clove than sense meant priest tonight. Confession with geography. Men swear they don't notice. Their feet corrected them anyhow. It is the oldest magic. Mothers season futures into supper. When the occupation began counting ovens, I made one invisible. A dead hob became a small shrine to lies. I laid a cookie sheet on the cold metal and slid parcels under. Maps in waxed paper, quinine wrapped in greaseproof, a coil of copper tucked inside parchment that looked exactly like baking paper because it was. If a uniform poked it, flour kissed his cuff and the kitchen blushed. Men will retreat from blushing. My one luxury was vanilla, the honest sort, being split with a dull knife that respects both poverty and beans. I used it to mask ether on nights a man needed to sleep fast. I learned to hold the bottle under the nose of a suspicious dog. Even virtue prefers vanilla. If the dog sneezed twice, I rerouted everything. Dogs can smell the unknown very brave. We built redundancy into people. If I died, the schoolmistress would shift the accent on Audred Hui. If she fell, the postmistress would stamp one extra index finger on the letter pad. If both were taken, the bread lady would push her pram with the left while squeaking mill or the right cloister. I trained a grandmother to overpay by one so quay, and a boy to forget change altogether, roofs. Networks survive by teaching ordinary to do algebra. Before sleep, I copied one card clean and burned one scrap dirty. Never both. The card recorded a recipe that could feed 8. The scrap recorded a night that had fed a town. Over the sink, I read my silent benediction, yield, enough. Pan, this street. Oven, the heart that still keeps time. Time, until it is safe to be boring again. I blew out the gas, turned the timer's face to the wall, and let the kitchen forget my voice so it could remember the town's. Market day is when the town pretends it has choices. Tents bloom like excuses. Scales discover their consciences. Women perform arithmetic louder than priests perform mercy. I carry a basket with loaves that look heavier than they are and recipes that are lighter than they seem. The gendarmes prefer the shade near the onions. The Germans prefer spectacle. I prefer cabbage. Its leaves hide a route better than a pocket ever will. My list peaks from my apron: flour, eggs, salt, apples, candles, and the right eyes read it like a weather report. Candles with a tick. The mill keeps a boat. Apples underlined twice. The quay is greedy. Bribe with fruit. I buy 2 cabbages when roofs are good and 1 when the square must be avoided. The bread lady ledger already knows, but likes to be courted by proof. I greet no one first. In markets, names draw flies. The dead drop lives in the honestest place, the scale pan at the spice stall. The vendor is a scandal to salt and a saint to sense. She weighs cinnamon with the tiny brass weights and then forgets one on the pan. That weight is hollow, a thimble with a conscience. I slip it into my sleeve while admiring anise, which means schoolmistress tonight. The swap is always equal. She gets bay leaves wrapped around a name that is not a name. Unknown very brave. And I get the weight with a sliver of onion skin tucked where brass turns to dark. It never rattles. We never do either. I hang my basket on my left arm when the cloister lane says yes, and on my right when the market cut-through says no. The posture teaches the network faster than a whisper. A child bumps my hip, apologizes in a voice that has learned to apologize for larger men, and palms my menu board letter, an M for mill, crooked by one nail. His sister lingers at the turnip stall, studying shapes as if she were considering sculpture instead of centuries. She will be a teacher if she survives being brave at the wrong age. At the butcher, the dog with opinions naps under the board. I praise his patience and buy nothing that bleeds. Butcher's paper wraps the smell that follows men to checkpoints. I use grocer's brown, clean, stiff, loyal to its lack of flourish, and slide a recipe card beneath the fold. Yield 6, pan 18 centimeters, oven left, 32 minutes. Move 6, Cooper's Lane, North Quay, when my timer says 3 shorts and 1 long. He wipes his hands and ties the clove hitch I prefer for the mill, though we both pretend he ties everything that way. Men appreciate the dignity of habit when courage has to borrow their fingers. The postmistress arrives with her basket of envelopes, which is how a town admits it has news. She frowns at the sky to make it bureaucratic and selects a letter to be misdelivered. The corner bears B, 12 clipped. Checkpoint 12 counts corners, a void, and 3 dots in the rubber date stamp bloom where the pad bleeds. She places it upright in my basket like a blessing and moves on, spectacles preoccupied with someone else's sins. I pay her later in nutmeg, which means do not confess to Father R. Confess to me. Her mouth twitches. She is not a woman who enjoys comedy, but she tolerates mine. I make my last stop at the green stall where Madame Boulard sells lettuce that wilts only for uniforms. I choose a cabbage and test its heart with my thumbnail. Crisp is roofs, dull is cellars. The heart answers with a clean snap. I loosen the outer leaves, slide in a sliver of wax paper that has learned to behave like skin, and tuck it shut with nothing more scandalous than a toothpick. The sliver holds a single word done in weak ink. After, because sometimes the bravest instruction is to delay. The town obeys better when its courage is postponed by vegetables. On my way out, a Gestapo coat slick as bad sugar turns the aisle into a corridor. The man wearing it examines sausages with the concentration of a child counting wolves. I stop, tie my twine slower than modesty allows, and let a bread heel fall. A boy grabs it, grins, and crumbles it for pigeons. Pigeons rise like excuses, and in their rush the coat chooses to step back instead of forward. Some days we win at the speed of birds. I pass the fountain, coins asleep, water rehearsing innocence, and turn toward the bakery. When I lift the basket to my left again, 3 women mirror me without looking. We will move by the cloister. We will bake the afternoon into orders. And when the timer sings 32, the square will fill with smoke from kitchens that are not cooking anything at all. The square teaches patience by making change slowly. I queue at the egg stall behind a man who smells of machine oil and innocence trying to learn posture. He asks for a dozen and receives 11. The vendor raises an eyebrow to see if he deserves the 12th. I lay my ration slips down like cards at a wake and ask for half a dozen, large. Half means have the group after the fountain. Large means send the taller one first. He casts a longer shadow if followed. The vendor taps 1 shell. Hairline crack, then sets it aside and whispers, better for cake than for walking, which is how we say he should not go tonight. I buy it anyway. Courage bakes tomorrow, too. At the cheese cart, I praise a wedge with a face that forgives knives. The cheesemonger cuts 2 thin slices and 1 thick. 2 thin means 2 couriers slipped the east alley. Thick means 1 waits with the priest until vespers. He wraps them in newspaper, the kind that still believes its own adjectives, and the headline becomes the alibi that crosses checkpoints before men do. I tuck the packet under grocer's brown, a sandwich of lies generous enough to feed 3. I circle once more past the spice stall to return the hollow brass weight, emptied now of onion skin and full of relief. The vendor coughs in the key that means you are followed by boredom, not by intent. I adjust my scarf so it covers the left collarbone, cloister route still green, and let the square's noise drown the thought that the square is loud when it has crushed something small. By the flower buckets, color has learned discretion. I choose 3 geraniums red and 1 white, the way librarians do when rooms must learn grammar. The florist wraps them in tissue meant to rustle as loudly as gossip. Inside, a sliver of paper says, after bread, the market's way of sequencing survival. I move toward the bakery with the dignity of errands. Dignity is the slowest safe speed. The butcher's boy jogs past with a tray and the kind of grin that has rescued adults from themselves. He bumps me on purpose, an accident the town rehearses, and my shopping list flutters. A woman with sensible shoes, the schoolmistress, stops it with a toe, reads candles with a tick, and tilts her head in a nod, small enough to pass for a stretch. She buys nothing and leaves with everything. Near the Cooper's Lane, the square narrows its courage to a gap. A felgendarm with a moonshade sermonizes to a dog that deserves a better priest. He takes interest in the butcher's paper of the man ahead of me, not in my clean grocer's wrap. I stand behind Madame Boulard, who performs frailty with a strength I cannot lift. She rearranges cabbage leaves and reveals a toothpick that should not be there to anyone who knows cabbages. The officer does not. He is studying the art of being obeyed by sausages. We pass with the solemnity of widows who can still make soup. At the fountain, I meet my parity check. A boy, new to fear, old to hunger, asks if I have yesterday's bread. I hand him the heel. He crumbles it as if feeding pigeons and lets 3 crumbs fall on the stone lip. Market, mill, quay. A 4th crumb, smaller, child can carry. He pockets the rest with a look that learns quickly. I pretend not to notice. He pretends not to save me. The dead drop for returns lives where no one suspects confessions. The church steps. Women rest there with baskets and size cataloged by season. I sit, loosen the scarf, and retie it with the knot tails tucked, women and children. A girl in an apron too clean, Elisa's doing, sits beside me and admires the geraniums. I hand her the white. The florist paper says after bread. Elisa's palm, when she receives the stem, says after bells. We do not compare notes. Both can be true when a town is careful. On the way home, the square tries one last trick. A Gestapo coat blocks the alley like a fallen wardrobe. He has the look of a man who angles questions as if they were fish. Recipes, he asks, amused by the apron he has decided belongs to a certain quiet. Only the ones everyone already knows. I say, and let the basket's weight explain me. He enjoys his own cleverness at a volume that keeps me alive. When he steps aside, I let the paper cone of cinnamon, which is not cinnamon, settle deeper under the cabbage leaves. Spices are for winter and for routes that cannot afford to smell like routes. Back in my kitchen, market noise falls away the way a boiled kettle stops singing when its purpose is spent. I hang the list on a nail where steam can find it and watch the starch ink appear. Roofs, after bread, after bells. The oven timer faces the wall until I tell it what kind of radio to be. I sort eggs, 11 for dinner, 1 for tomorrow's cake that keeps people home, and set the flowers by the window, 3 red, 1 white. The town will read them when it passes. It always does. And when the timer sings 32, the square will think kitchens are making dessert. We will be making distance. Afternoons on market day grow a second skin. Dust over cobbles, gossip over prices, fatigue over courage. That's when drops travel best, under the glaze of routine. I make the last circuit with my basket lighter than it looks and my apron heavier than anyone guesses. The spice weight has gone home. The butcher's paper has not. Inside, between 2 sheets too clean for meat, sleeps a thin coil of copper masquerading as string. If a uniform asks, I will tie a very long bow and confess to vanity. The music of the square turns practical. Stall pulls knocking, knives tapping boards, a hawker calling pears as if they were news. I pass the tram stop where the conductor punches too many holes. Today he clips 2 extra in a diagonal, roofs. A woman with sensible shoes steps aboard and then off again, her fare wasted, which is how we say the message landed. A gendarme watches and decides to admire his reflection in a window that does not like him. Mirrors under occupation learn to lie. By the linen cellar, where bolts of cloth smell like soap and hope, I forget my shopping list, the one with candles ticked and apples underlined twice. A girl, 15, fury disguised as freckles, finds it and scolds me for untidiness loud enough for the square. She tucks it into my basket with adolescent disgust and a pressed thumbprint at the corner. After bells. Teenagers excel at contempt and clandestine punctuation. I owe one more return. The dead drop for spent messages lives in the pump handle by the well. The iron stem unscrews with the stubbornness of widowers. I lean my weight, complain about age like a woman rehearsing a future, and twist once. A paper seam opens just enough to accept a recipe card gone to heaven. Flour smudges. Wrong oven noted. Time crossed out. I fold it to innocence and feed it to the pump. The handle drinks secrets without savor. Water later will taste of iron and relief. On my way to the bakery, I pass the school gate where chalk still dares to be white. The blackboard carries sums and, beneath them, someone's small rebellion. 3 plus 2 is equal to 5 written twice. Twice means repeat route after bells. There are cleaner ciphers, but none so perfectly scolded by a nun. I rub the lower sum with the heel of my palm and leave the upper. Redundancy is how children and networks survive correction. Near the Coopers, the alley tightens into a question. My answer is pace. Slow enough to be patience, fast enough to be uninteresting. From a second-floor window, laundry signals what posters cannot. Sheets only, square 2 watched. Sheets and a single towel, market passable, avoid fountain corner. No wash, someone gone or guarding. Today, a sheet and towel. I let a crumb of heel fall. 1. So the boy on the bike who shadows me can count without writing. He circles twice, then vanished into roofs. He will return a man if time agrees. At the bakery door the bell is a gossip with bad timing. I muffle it with my elbow and slide inside sideways. The motion of women who've learned doorways can be auditors. The window sign reads tart AUX poems augured hui with the accent over the U, usual time. I move it to the O roofs. The gesture is small. The room leans with it. Elise has laid out paper cones of cinnamon, which is not cinnamon, beside the register. I take one and trade her the toothpicked cabbage. Soup, I say for anyone listening, which means the afternoon needs quiet. She replies, après, which means we pay courage after bread. She slides a clean recipe card under my twine, the thing you destroy at a corner if a man starts asking nouns, and tightens the knot in a clove hitch. Mill. We perform the closing ritual for market day errands. I buy nothing I can't explain. Elise sells everything that can pass as lunch, and the room forgets me with the grace of places that keep better secrets than they keep receipts. At the door, I let the bell gossip once. The square answers with indifference. Indifference is the best curtain. Homeward, the town reads my flowers. 3 red geraniums, 1 white. Windows make a civic face. In one, a saint card has slid 1 thumb lower, bridge watched. In another, a curtain drawn and then opened 2 fingers. Wait 2 minutes at the corner. The postmistress steps from her doorway, pretends to rearrange envelopes, and places one in my basket addressed to nobody on no street with the prefecture's seal embarrassed on its flap. Inside will be blanks and rumors. Outside is all anyone needs to see. A woman who minds her business poorly. At the last turn before my lane, a Gestapo coat pauses where alleys make echoes. His eyes are catalogs that want to become indictments. He asks what is in my basket. Soup, I say, and show him bread. He taps the cone of cinnamon with a finger that thinks it knows spices. For winter, I shrug. He flicks the paper. A dusting escapes and scents the afternoon like innocence. He lets me pass because men who enjoy theater dislike being cast as scenery by Soup. In my kitchen, I empty the basket like a defendant laying out proof of virtue. Bread, cabbage, eggs, flowers, paper. I hang the list where steam can confess it, and the starch ink rises. After bread / after bells / roofs. I set the timer to 32 and turn it toward the wall until it remembers what kind of radio it is. Then I write the market's ledger on the back of a recipe where nobody will look. Weights traded, onion skin spent, coil delivered, boy learned crumb counting, dog sneezed once, watch the bridge, saints indifferent, good, pride sifted, fear beaten but not overmixed. I light the oven and decide what to bake. Distance. They did not come for me first. They came for the books, as if recipes were seditious because they tell ordinary people what to do and when. 2 gendarmes bored enough to be cruel. 1 Gestapo coat slick enough to make a corridor out of my doorway. The bell above the shop door lied for us. 1 chime, small, domestic. I wipe my hands on my apron the way women do when they are choosing which lies will bake fastest. Ordnungskontroll. The code announced, as those syllables could purify flour. He pointed at the shelf where I kept La Cuisinière de la Campagne, Escoffier, 2 fine for ration years, kept for vanity and cover, and a dozen grease-stained notebooks that knew more about the town than any prefect. Cookbooks, he said, almost tenderly, the way men speak to things they are about to ruin. I nodded like a woman honored to be inspected. The left oven breathed harmless, empty and clean as a lie rehearsed. The right oven did what it always does when men with boots get too close. It remembered heat. I had slid in a tray of innocent bread ends. All heel, no story, and the smell of browning quiet made the room polite. He gestured to the books, and I began the small ceremony of laying them out. Heavy to light, proud to humble, French to stubborn. The gendarme with the poet's mustache pretended to read spines. His partner counted my ration stamps with the suspicion of a man who believes arithmetic can arrest women. They found the notebooks, linen thread, soft covers glazed with butter fingerprints, and the salt of old hands. The coat flipped one open and admired the order. Yield, pan, oven, time. The columns where I keep my country. He ran a thumb down the ingredients as if testing them for treason. Flour, salt, water, yeast. He smirked. So simple. I agreed. The best things are. He did not hear the insult. These, he said, go with us. He stacked 3 notebooks and patted them as if he were domestic. I handed over the ones I had already prepared to lose. Clean copies, model recipes written in the good nun's hand I keep for company, each with the cipher inverted or useless. Yield 6 that meant nothing, time 32 that meant cake only. The true cards lived where a soldier's palm would not go. Under flour, beneath the slicer, inside the hollow of Escoffier's spine the way pride hides grief. Elise had taught me the trick with the bookbinder's knife. I had taught the book to keep its face. They asked about spices, why so much cinnamon, so little clove, and I became a woman who brags about her palate instead of her parity bits. Clove is a bully, I told him. You let it in the room and it talks over everyone. He smiled, pleased to be lectured on superiority. Clove, in my cipher, meant priest tonight. He had no notion that he was praising the route to his own invisibility. The coat made a ritual of arranging my knives, then accused me of untidiness when one blade bore a flour crust. I apologized like a professional. While he scolded the blade, the gendarme with the mustache tested the menu board letters. He straightened the M I had left crooked for mill, and, in doing so, canceled a message. I let my breath count to 32 while the timer watched me from the wall. After bread becomes after bells with a single fussy finger. Markets have saved us with less. Backroom, the coat ordered. The ovens exhaled propriety. In the storeroom I kept sacks stacked by date. Not the prefecture's date, my date. Which days the flour had carried routes, which days it had carried only supper. He drove a bayonet into one sack and watched it bleed honest flour. He liked honest messes. Men do. Labels, he said, and I gave him labels, inked carefully in the same hand I use for times I want ignored. Rye, wheat, potato, lies. He laughed at lies as if I had attempted charm. I had attempted inventory. On the bench, the bowl of poolish rose like a gentleman who still knows to stand when a woman enters. The coat asked what it was. A starter, I said. It keeps memory. He made the face men make when something domestic sounds like theology. He reached as if to punch it down, and I swatted his hand with my wooden spoon like his mother should have. The gendarme with the mustache almost smiled. The coat didn't. He counted to 10 inside his jaw and pretended it was discipline. He found the hollow hob, the dead oven that is not an oven at all. He rapped it and frowned at its lack of tone. Broken. Since the winter, I lied truthfully. We keep it for trays. He gestured. I lifted the sheet. Inside, nothing, which is to say everything had already left. Yesterday's coil of copper, paraffin-wrapped quinine, the wax paper maps, all gone out under cabbage and butcher's paper. He saw absence and congratulated himself on finding it. There is a species of officer who prefers emptiness to work. Kitchen gods send them to me like gifts. Before they left, I knew they would ask for fire. Raids crave finale. The code ordered the gendarmes to make a pile of loose pages, the clean copies I had meant to lose anyway, and then he required a match. I gave him one from the tin that always empties too quickly. He fed the pile. Paper curled the way people do when they repeat what they've been told. I'm more nothing my hands could not remake. Flower is patient. So am I. He kept one notebook, the cleanest, tucked tight under his slick arm where he stores his confidence. The others he left to smolder until I kicked them flat and the room returned to cooking. On his way out, he paused at the door and sniffed the proofing brioche. Smells like home, he said, and waited to hear in my silence that he still had one. I turned the timer to face the wall. When they were gone, I turned it back and set it to 32, 3 short, 1 long. The kitchen became a radio again. The bell rang once, domestic as before. Outside, the square resumed gossip as if gossip had saved it. I gathered ash with a bench scraper, sifted it through my fingers, and blew it into the bin. Notebooks gone, ledger intact where it always is, bone, steam, habit. I opened Escoffier at the hollow spine and kissed the 3 half-cards sleeping there. Quay, mill, cloister, the way women kiss luck before they walk. Then I washed the wooden spoon, for form, and waited for the town to read the smell of brioche as delay. Smoke has a talent for pretending to be memory. After they left, it looped in the rafters like an old hymn and then lost the words. I opened both windows, the obedient one and the stubborn one, and let the street judge my housekeeping. Neighbors drifted past with the curiosity rationing allows. Madame Boulard paused long enough to cough twice. Dogs. And to set down a cabbage that weighed more than gossip. Inside its heart, a sliver of wax paper whispered after an ink that knew how to starve. I tucked it under the slicer, where men who like knives forget to look. Elise arrived by the alley that pretends it isn't a route. She smelled of library dust and bad news kept tidy. We did our audit as women do when there isn't time to faint. Hollow hob, empty, success. Escoffier spine, 3 half cards present, sleeping like saints who permit thievery. Menu letters, the M now straight, message cancelled. We would resend with pastry instead. Poolish, punched down by temper, not by baker. It would recover. Most living things do when left alone by uniforms. What did they take? She asked, already counting the loss into tomorrow's recipe. Clean copies, I said. They'll think I'm sentimental. She smiled, the kind of tired triumph that tastes like salt on bread. We stacked the surviving notebooks and set 2 to dry on the cooling rack. A sacrament in a kitchen without a church. Ash marks on the covers looked like fingerprints of saints learning to bake. We rewrote 1 card from Bone. Tart EUX poems. Yield. For pan, 20 centimeters. Oven. Left. Time. 45. Beneath. In the place that passes for a heart. For bodies. Cooper's Lane. North Quay. Just before curfew. I copied it in my nun's hand and then again in my own, because networks die when handwriting becomes a single point of failure. Elise took the second copy and hid it in a sleeve that has smuggle braver things than flour. Then came Niash work. Raids demand finale. Kitchens demand crumbs. I gathered the char of lost pages and pressed it through a sieve. Black snowfall into a bowl that also knows sugar. With a soft brush, I toned a fresh card, aging it 30 years in 30 seconds. Men who steal notebooks love the clean. They do not respect stains. I made 3 such elders and filed them where future raids will discover virtue and leave usefulness behind. The ration stamp tin had shifted, that timid scrape on metal that means a gloved hand counted what did not belong to it. I checked the B, 12 corners, still clipped, still telling avoid checkpoint 12. The sugar pad, still bleeding by design. The meat roll, still clean. Dog's bored, not hungry. I rearranged nothing. A room survives better when it can testify that it has changed very little. We paid our debt to spectacle. I set a tray of brioche to proof beneath a damp cloth and let the smell argue with the square on our behalf. Nothing to see here but butter, nothing to steal but patience. I made meringues for the prefect's nephew, sugar that collapses if you beat it past humility, and stamped the box with a flourish that would flatter his future report. Elise laughed once, quietly. Meringues for men who don't know when to stop, she said. Teach by dessert, I answered. The boy with axle grease knocked the way boys knock when they have learned that doorways are decisions. He had oil under his nails and fear under his cheekbones. They asked my name. He confessed without confessing. I handed him a whole loaf, not sliced, and a clean card to destroy at the corner. On its back I wrote rest before slicing, and he read do not brag, even to your courage. He tucked the loaf under his arm in the old way men carry babies. Outside, a bicycle bell practiced cursive, 2 short, 1 long. Market, then mill. Before Elise left, we staged mistakes for the next visitors. I left a wooden spoon on the floor precisely where a clumsy woman would. I smudged a thumb on vanilla near the stove to explain other smells to dogs and men. I set a jar of cloves, my cipher for priest tonight, front and center for any officer who enjoys feeling superior about spice. The true instruction would move by glaze on loaves, by vent cuts on pies, by the timer set to 32 and turn back to face the room like a radio that prefers sincerity to secrecy. At dusk, the postmistress came with a complaint large enough to shelter a favor. Your packaging, madam, she scolded for any ear that needed theater, is too heavy for the morning post. Under the comfort of bureaucracy, she slid a stack of blank prefecture forms into my drawer. Between 2 sheets, a rumor we could spread like butter. Inventory of cultural clubs begins Friday. Cooper first. I underlined apples on tomorrow's shopping list twice. The square likes fruit. It can be bribed to ripen where we need it. Night brought the sound ovens trust. Water finding its boil. Voices finding their inside tone. I set soup on the back ring. Thick, forgiving, the sort that keeps families home when stories want to wander. And I misplaced one letter on the window sign again. Tart AUX Poems, Audrey. A child would spot it. A gendarme would not. The kitchen took back its usual temperature, the one where butter consents and dough forgives. I wrote the raid into the ledger where no warrant reaches. Clean copies seized, true cards intact, spine saints faithful, hob empty and therefore full of victory. Market will read, after bread, after bells, roofs. Boy not sliced, pride not overbeaten, fear beaten just enough. I tucked the line behind my ribs and turned the timer to 32. 3 short, 1 long. Somewhere a bicycle would choose roofs over bridge, and a dog would sneeze at vanilla and remember to be bored. Raids don't end when boots leave. They echo in how a room remembers to breathe. I stood with my palm flat on the bench, feeling the grain count backwards from panic. What keeps better time than clocks when you've wound the clock too tight? The right oven exhaled like an old aunt who forgives, sweet, yeasty, a sermon about patience that never mentions God. The left oven, the one that means North Quay, clicked its cooling clicks. Each was a pin dropping on the ex libris board of a town that pretends it isn't a library. I cleaned in the order that keeps stories intact. First the ash, scraped into a bowl, sifted, folded into the bin beneath a layer of onion skins, a saint's reliquary in a poor parish. Then the stamps, counted, returned to their tin with the shamelessness of tools. Then the knives, laid in a line that could pass inspection or perform surgery. I returned Escoffier to his shelf and pressed my thumb to his spine where the hollow keeps 3 half-cards like teeth. The book felt heavier than it is. Treason has a specific gravity. In the window I set the flowers again. 3 red geraniums, 1 white. Red for routes exist, white for listen before you hero. A woman paused outside, the kind of pause that is almost a curtsy to the day, and touched the glass with a fingertip as if testing the weather. She walked on, and with her went news that will survive being repeated. I rewrote the menu to flatter boredom. Soup du jour pain. Reigned a special. On the board, I let 1 letter slide the wrong way, just off square, careless by design. A baker learns to fix everything but angles. Angles betray us. The M slanted again became mill. The town would read it in the corner of its eyes. Evening rehearsed obedience. Curfew thinning voices to the color of tea. The postmistress returned, this time as a customer who wished to discuss envelopes and weights. She bought nothing heavy and left me a stack of light. Forms with seal, virtue pre-printed. Between 2 blanks, a handwritten list of clubs due for inspection. She underlined Cooper so hard the paper bruised. I slid the packet under the slicer, steel that likes secrets, and turned to the ovens before fear could make a decision and call it policy. The brioche had risen like a promise. I brushed it with milk glaze, saying refuse wine, talk about weather, and scored the vents in a diamond for market and a crescent for quay, half a dialogue baked into breakfast. The freeform galette accepted its triangle, cloister, cut in with a tenderness that made me ashamed and proud in the same breath. I set 1 loaf aside unsliced. Some instructions must travel whole. Elise came back at last light with library hands, ink in the cuticles, decision on the knuckles. She carried a parcel wrapped in grocer's brown and grammar. Inside, a photographic plate in waxed paper. The clean copies as they left me, the coat carrying them like trophies. Insurance, she said. If they quote your recipes back to you, we'll know which lies they learned. We laughed too quickly and stopped before pride made the sound brittle. Pride burns faster than cardstock. We prepared the decoy kindness for the prefect's nephew, a box of meringues that look like policy and a single brioche with a gloss that flatters men who enjoy being flattered. I tucked a recipe card under the string. One of the elders I aged with ash, so his report could say we confiscated the baker's secrets in his conscience, if any, could go back to sleep. The true card went into Escoffier's spine with the others and learned to keep its breath small. There is always one more audit. I counted bowls, 3. Tins, 2. Sacks, stacked by my dates, not theirs. Bay leaves, crossed, uncrossed. Twine, tails tucked, tails loose. Matches, the box more empty than it should be. Men love finales. I set aside a paper cone of cinnamon, which is not cinnamon, for Father R., who would translate it into Vespers in geography. The cone went into the dead hob for 2 minutes of invisibility, When it came out, it had learned how not to be seen. At 9, the schoolmistress tapped the side door with the rhythm of a woman who has taught children to line up by heart. I handed her a loaf with 3 barely there scores, quay, cloister, mill, and a clean card that deserved to die at a corner. We didn't trade words. We traded temperature. She carried away heat. I received the night. When she left, she brushed the window sign with the back of her glove, setting the accent over the O without looking. Our town speaks with its hands. Curfew folded the street like laundry. I turned the timer to 32, 3 short, 1 long, and let the kitchen become a radio again. In the quiet between buzz and breath, I made the entry the day demanded, rate absorbed. Clean copies gone to die patriotic deaths. True cards lived. Mill by pastry, cloister by triangle, market by diamond. Boy intact, pride cooled, fear beaten but not overmixed. Tomorrow, apples. I wrote it not with ink but with habit, the only ledger the enemy cannot confiscate. Before bed, I did the thing that keeps networks from confusing courage with theater. I made soup. Thick, humble, the sort that buys a house another night of ordinary. I placed a bowl on the sill for the boy with axle grease, and another for the unknown very brave who will never knock, but will pass in the alley and breathe easier for broth. Then I blew out the flame, faced the timer to the wall, let it forget it is a radio, and slept while yeast and silence finished their work. They took me from the kitchen at an hour when broth forgives everything. No theater this time, no van, no boots rehearsing a parade, just a knock with grammar and 2 men who agreed on nothing except authority. The one with the wire spectacles said my name like a diagnosis. The other, mustache waxed into courage, said, "Bring your apron." I did. I have learned that men who decide what you are may as well carry part of the truth for you. The room was the color of cold tea, stained by other people's answers. A table, 2 chairs, an enamel kettle that had forgotten how to sing. They enjoy offering comfort as if that were a kindness unique to them. They sat me and asked if I would like something hot. "Only if the water boils," I said, and watched the spectacles invent a smile. He turned the knob. The flame lied the way small flames do, blue, neat, eager to be believed. I let my hands be busy, the way women survive. I untied the apron, smoothed its front, folded the twine ends in the habit of someone who expects to be noticed for neatness and not for algebra. The mustache watched my fingers the way a boy watches cards he is about to lose. "You bake," he said, as if I might have forgotten. I agreed. "And write recipes. Only so the town will stop asking me twice." They began with bread because bread is a language every man thinks he speaks. "Why such exact times?" Spectacles asked, tapping a clean copy of Tart AUX poems they'd kept as a trophy. 32 minutes. 45 minutes. I told him the truth. Ovens demand consistency, and impatience collapses meringues. He leaned forward as if to sniff the lie. "And why left oven and right oven?" "Because they bake differently," I said. "The left remembers winter, the right envies summer." The mustache laughed at that. Spectacles did not. "Who is Father R?" the mustache asked, glancing at a bundle of ration forms that had learned to look official near my handwriting. "Our priest," I said, "who gives fewer lectures than you do." "You send people to him," Spectacles said, "often by the word clothed." I shrugged. "He prefers it in mulled wine." Spectacles tapped the margin where I had underlined cool completely, the way a woman underlines wait for second bell, and tried to read the rest with his jaw. Jaws are poor readers. They produced a recipe card smudged the way mine smudge when the kitchen is honest, and my stomach remembered the day I had written it. Yield 6, pan 18 centimeters, oven left, time 32. He read the front as a judge reads a napkin. Then he turned it over. Blank. "There are no notes," he said, disappointed enough to be cruel. "Because I keep them in my head," I answered, "because that is the only safe place for verbs." The kettle considered singing. I watched the bubbles ladder up the side and fail, little cowards, 2, 3 times. "It isn't boiling," I said. "You'll make bitter tea." He lifted it anyway and poured. I did not correct him. Men who do not wait for water are the reason pastry fails and wars last. "Sugar," the mustache offered, generous with what is rationed. "Not in black tea," I said. "It makes it taste like confession." He took his without. Spectacles added 2. He would add a third if I let him think he was winning. They tried the neighbors first. "Madame Boulard, Cabbage, I said, always chooses hearts that keep. The postmistress, spectacles that make male behave. The schoolmistress, sensible shoes. They wanted nouns. I offered adjectives. Nouns make arrests. Adjectives make men feel informed. The mustache smiled despite orders. Spectacles counted my adjectives as if they were men. He would miscount. Adjectives are loyal to whoever feeds them. Your timer, Spectacles said suddenly, as if a bird had spoken through him. 3 short, 1 long. A habit, I said, from an oven that refuses to be punctual. He drummed the pattern on the table, tap, 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 drag, and watched my face for the flinch of meaning. I gave him housekeeping. It lets me turn the loaves without looking. He tasted the lie like bad butter. You turn more than loaves. That is the work of women, I said. We turn what sticks. The mustache opened a parcel wrapped in grocer's brown. Inside, a heel of bread, the kind I give boys who ask for yesterday. He set it down between us as if it could testify. This, he said, smells of vanilla. He had learned something he did not respect. I mask ether with it, I said plainly. For the infirmary. I let the word sit, heavy as a loaf. Men distrust any noun that claims mercy as motive. They usually leave it alone. He did. Spectacles tried kindness next, the lazy sort. You could keep your ovens, he murmured. You could bake for officers. The clubs prefer good brioche. He placed a blank prefecture form on the table and patted it like a tame animal. We can stamp this. Paper rises easier than dough, I said, and falls faster. He smiled like a man who enjoys metaphors without understanding they can cut. I asked for milk out of rudeness disguised as politeness. Tea requires it when overboiled. The mustache left to fetch some. Spectacles stayed, greedy for the intimacy of 2. You write substitutions, he said softly. Butter for lard, apples for pears. That is a recipe's conscience, I said. It remembers that houses are different. Houses are all the same, he said, a tyrant's lullaby. Then perhaps your tea will taste like ours when it cools, I answered. He stopped smiling. Milk arrived with the wrong temperature, lukewarm as compromise. I did not drink. The room smelled of paper and jealousy. He wanted the part of me that kept the town ordinary while doing something extraordinary beneath it. Why so many cards? He asked, flipping through the stack of clean copies he'd stolen earlier. So I don't have to repeat myself, I said. Women who repeat themselves are called tiresome. He found this funny and then, for a dangerous half-second, found it true. They tried silence. I accepted it. Librarians sell it by the hour. Bakers earn it before dawn. In the quiet, the kettle made a second attempt at song. Real boil, at last, rolling, unapologetic. Now, I said, and lifted it without asking, poured the tea out, and remade it proper. The mustache yielded his cup. Spectacles did not. He drank his bitter. Men who prefer bitterness to instruction are the easiest to outlast. When they stood, it was with the confidence of men who believe time is theirs. We will come again, the spectacles promised, as if repetition could become result. We bake every morning, I said, as if repetition were my religion. At the door, the mustache looked back, not at me, but at my apron, still folded, twine tails tucked. He is the kind who will someday choose not to look when it matters. I blessed him with a lie of luck and carried my own back to the kitchen, where the timer waits for women to tell it what kind of radio to be. They sent me home with a promise shaped like a shadow. We will return. Promises like that breed in corners, so I cleaned the corners first. But the interrogation did not end at my door. It followed as a palate follows bitterness, resetting taste to something you can survive. The town had questions I could not let it ask aloud. I answered them with bread. News travels by temperature. I opened the right oven, the one that envies summer, and slid in loaves brushed with milk glaze. Refuse wine, talk weather. On 2 I cut single long slashes, 1 decisive turn. Do not linger at corners. On 1 round I cut 3 vents close together, circling patrols, keep radius small. A woman can bake an after-action report and sell it as supper. Men are relieved when survival tastes like butter. But the room still held the interrogation, its stale tea breath, its furniture's talent for listening. I set the kettle to a true boil and poured it into the sink like a priest canceling a sacrament performed badly. Then I remade black tea that did not need sugar and took the first cup to the back step, where cats hold court over dignity. I poured a finger of tea onto the stones, for those who will not knock, and drank the rest as if patience had a flavor. Elise came by the lane, skirt catching the day's last light like dust that forgives. We spoke in adverbs, the language of women who cannot afford nouns. Gently, she asked. Briefly, I said. Soon. Repeatedly. She understood. Their questions had learned persistence, but not precision. She emptied her bag on the bench. 2 blank forms with prefect seals, a list of clubs already inspected, and, soft as a truce, a photograph of my clean copies tucked proud under a slick arm. If their report quotes your card, she said, tapping the image, we will know which lies to feed next. We file evidence the way we set dough, cover, weight, prod with a knuckle when needed. We audited exposure. Who had seen me taken? The butcher's boy, the schoolmistress, the postmistress, safe eyes. Who had not seen me return? The boy with axle grease. Send him heel, Elise said, meaning bread and permission. I cut a crust and salted its north, east, south, west edges 2 pinches, 2 bodies may move. I wrapped it in newspaper that believed its own adjectives and wrote rise if I meant it. She tucked it away like a librarian shelving a dangerous book. I reset the window sign, tart AUX poems augured we, with the accent over the O, roofs. The letter felt like the lightest weight I had lifted all day. Inside, I copied one recipe wrong with careful fidelity to error. Yield 6, pan 18, oven right, time 25 to 28. Anyone stealing this would route men to alleys on a night that required roofs. Deadly, unless you also read the glaze and the vents and the timer and the twine tails. Tyrants like single points of truth. We cook with redundancy. Night brought the sound kitchen's love, cutlery deciding to be quiet. I laid the apron flat, twine ends tucked, and practiced the faces I would need if they came again. The one that forgives clumsy questions, the one that pities men who prefer bitter tea, the one that inventories fear and charges it to tomorrow. I pulled the stamp tin and clipped B. 12 once more. Checkpoint 12 will be counting corners, which means they are bored enough to be careful. Boredom saves us until it turns into industry. At Vespers, Father R. sent a boy with sensible knees to collect cinnamon. I passed him the paper cone that is not cinnamon at all. His palm held for a second longer than boys admit. Weight registered, mission-sized. Merci, madam, he said, and did not say the second thing boys say when they want to be brave in front of women. He left with a bicycle bell that did not dare to speak until the corner. I paid my debt to fear. I mixed a poolish and let it decide if the night could support roofs. If it puffed in an hour, we would move. If it sulped to 90 minutes, we would cellar and feed soup instead of stories. It rose like a sentence that knows where it is going. The timer I turned to 32 and then 64, a repeat for redundancy. 3 short, 1 long, again. When the boy with axle grease finally came, he brought stillness the way some men bring flowers. He looked older by a day and by something that does not respect calendars. They asked my name twice, he said. The second time is always a colder blade. I handed him the heel and a clean card already doomed to be destroyed at the noisy corner. On its back, I had written rest before slicing in the unremarkable hand of a housewife. In the fold I had sewn a thread the color of dusk, roofs. He held the bread like a child, then like a job. Timer, he asked, because men who fix things trust machines that keep time. 32, I said. He nodded once, the kind of agreement that has kept towns alive since towns learned fear, and left by the alley that doesn't think it's a route. I wrote the interrogation's line item in the ledger my bones keep. Offered bitter tea, remade. Offered paper, refused stamp. Clean copies compromised on purpose, true grammar intact. Questions learned persistence, not precision. Boy intact, pride cooled, fear beaten but not overmixed. Then I crossed to the ovens, lifted a brioche, and tapped its underside. Hollow thump, the sound that says done and go, and you may cut only when cool. I placed it on the rack where steam tells windows weather and let the kitchen return to what kitchens do when men fail at questions. It taught the town to eat and wait and move on a schedule tyrants cannot read. Interrogations end on paper, they linger in air. The room had taught my lungs a slower grammar, so I retrained them with steam. A kettle at a true boil clears more ghosts than incense. I held my face in the cloud until my eyes watered, and the day remembered it was a kitchen day, not a theater day. Then I did the most subversive thing a questioned woman can do. I planned breakfast. I began with batches because survival scales better when divided. Batch A, 2 round loaves scored with triangles, cloister path open. Batch B, 3 batons with single long slashes, 1 decisive turn, do not promenade. Batch C, 1 freeform galette, vents in a diamond, market window narrow, choose shoulders over bravado. I brushed milk glaze on all, refuse wine, speak of weather, and reserved 1 unglazed. No conversations at corners. The oven door spoke in hinge key, left for North Quay, right for alleys. The timer stared at the wall, remembering what kind of radio to be. The aftertaste of questioning clings to hands. I wash mine with soap that remembers labor, then took up the twine. A square knot on batch A, clove hitch on B, bowline on C. Tails tucked, women and children first. On the unglazed loaf I left tails loose, meant only, do not linger. If anyone asked, I would say clumsy fingers betrayed me. A town already knows the difference between clumsiness and choreography. I wrote substitutions for the morning rush, the page where housewives forgive themselves and men stop reading. Butter lard became quay mill. Apples pears became market cloister. Yeast baking powder became priest postmistress. On the back I copied a line I'd learned in the interrogation room. Men who prefer bitter tea to instruction are easy to outlast. It is not a cipher. It is a policy. Elise returned once more, a shadow tucked under her arm. She had borrowed a sole from the darkroom and fixed it in silver, a proof sheet of the coat cradling my clean copies, his moonchain catching light like a guilty epaulette. If they quote your time and yield back to you, she said, we will rout around their cleverness. She placed the photo between Escoffier and La Cuisinière, a patriarch and a peasant watching over a daughter who has learned too many ways to lie well. We set a parity check across the room. I tilted the menu letter again, mill, and she moved the white geranium 1 finger to the left, women only. I underlined soup on the board, delay theatrics, and she dusted exactly 4 crumbs on the sill, for bodies may move. The room answered in its own materials. The wobble board settled. The clock admitted it had been wound too tight and gave back 6 dishonest minutes. Tyranny keeps time with boots. We keep it with forgiveness. The boy with axle grease came for the heel I owed his absence. He accepted it, and, with it, a paper cone of cinnamon, which is always not cinnamon, and a clean card that deserved to die heroically at a corner. Timer, he asked again, because some men asked to hear steadiness out loud. 32, I said, and then, because redundancy saves amateurs and professionals alike, 64. He smiled a mechanic's smile. Duplication comforts machines and boys. I paid a smaller debt to an older fear, the dog at checkpoint 12. On the counter, I laid out ration stamps. I clipped B, 12 twice, corners counted, take roofs, and overpunched sugar by 1, add a body if mercy insists. I pressed the meat roll clean, dog's bored, and then smudged it with vanilla, dogs will sneeze. You earn 2 heartbeats. 2 heartbeats is sometimes an avenue. When the kettle cooled, I remembered the room where men compare faces to answers and claim dominion over both. I wrote them into my ledger where no warrant reaches. Spectacles prefers paper to instruction. Mustache attends to hands. Neither waits for water to boil. Offered stamp, declined. Offered bitterness, remade tea. Their time linear, ours layered. Their nouns hungry, our adjectives fed. I filed the entry in bone, the only archive my work can trust. Midnight walked the lane with the careful feet of a town that refuses to be filmed. I turned the timer to face the room and set it, 3 short, 1 long. Through bricks and habits, it would find the men who tune themselves to useful sounds. I opened the window to the ordinary, placed the unglazed loaf on the sill for the unknown very brave, and set the brioche by to cool where steam writes weather onto glass. Before sleep, I did the kindness interrogation cannot compute. I rested the dough for tomorrow. Rest is an instruction tyrants mock and kitchens obey. I wrote one last note on the back of a recipe that will never be seized. Yield. Enough. Pan. This street. Oven. The heart that keeps time. Time. After bells. Then I blew out the flame, let yeast take the watch, and gave the night permission to make silence rise. A town cannot run on alarms. It must sometimes eat. I announced a feast the way women announce forgiveness, matter of fact, with lists. Soup du soir. Paying. Délette. Rein de special. Everyone knew rein de special means count carefully. The prefect's nephew had scheduled his inspection of cultural clubs for the next day, beginning at the Cooper. We scheduled dinner for tonight, beginning at the bakery, ending anywhere not on his list. A feast is the prettiest decoy. Hunger attends, pride bows, boots relax. I wrote a menu with a seating chart disguised as appetite. Potage paysanne, deep bowls, spoons that insist on two hands, meant elderly and children first, front bench. Brioche, easy to carry without crumbs, meant couriers on the edge, door seats, ready to stand. Galette Libre with triangle vents meant cloister route open, roofs after bells if glaze is pale. Tart aux poems with time. 32 whispered through the kitchen like a hymn. Move on my bell, 3 short, 1 long. I underlined soup on the chalkboard and left the accent on augured hui over the O roofs. Anyone who can read a window could read a way out. We dressed the room with harmlessness. Tablecloths washed thin by years, plates that forgive chips, 3 red geraniums and 1 white in the window. I placed salt at the head of the long table and pepper at the foot. Salt head meant quay first, pepper foot meant market second. Elise arranged cutlery by routes, forks for cloister, knives for mill, spoons for quay. The boy with axle grease stacked bread and batons along the north wall, 1 long slash across each. 1 decisive turn, do not promenade. He said nothing, as if speech would knock a plate over. Guests came by errands, not invitation. Widows with knitting that counts better than ledgers. Postmistress with envelopes that believe their own addresses. Schoolmistress with the wrong shoes for running and the right stride for it. Father R. washed his hands as if he suspected dinner might become sacrament. The butcher's boy lingered by the door like a comma that saves a sentence. I greeted no one by name. I placed bowls into hands and instructions into posture. The first course taught timing. Soup must be served hot and swallowed slowly. Escape must be planned and then sudden. I ladled thick, the kind that glues families to chairs, and watched the steam draft toward the window. On the fog glass I drew the circle, the line, the cross. Go/wait/not tonight. When the circle appeared, 3 women stood to fetch bread, collecting loaves with tails tucked, women and children. When the line returned, 2 men traded places at the table, staggered by a door. When the cross threatened, I stirred the soup and bought another minute with onions. We passed brioche like relief and galette like advice. I brushed milk glaze in the open while talking about weather. It dried to a sheen that said refuse wine and praise clouds. I cut the galette by triangles, cloister, and pressed the heel into the butcher's boy's pocket with 2 pinches of salt at compass points. 2 bodies may move. He touched his cap and refused dessert. Some boys become men between main course and tart. At the end of the table, the postmistress placed 2 letters beneath her plate as if cushioning conscience. Blanks with seals that can frighten doors. Beside them, she set a brass weight from the spice stall. Hollow again, onion skin tucked to the dark. Elise moved the white geranium 1 finger left, women only, and the room understood without losing its appetite. We ate like a town that intends to digest survival. Feasts sound like permission. We harnessed the noise. I let the timer tick in plain hearing, 3 short, 1 long, while I told a story about butter. The hinge on the left oven answered in its own key, North Quay, and the boy with axle grease drifted to the door as casually as a draft. I set tart aux poems on the sill to cool completely, wait for the second bell, and everyone admired its patience. Admiration buys seconds. The seating held. At the salt end quay, 2 widows with shoulders like thresholds rose to stretch. Each took a baton with a single long slash, 1 decisive turn, and left on the milk-glossed instruction, talk weather, refuse wine. The tram conductor outside overpunched a ticket twice in diagonal, roofs. The widows became pigeons in shawls and disappeared into the gray the way good theater does. At the Pepper End market, the schoolmistress fussed over a child's spoon and then went for napkins, which is how brave women practice understatement. I handed her a paper cone of cinnamon, not cinnamon, and a loaf with 3 close vents, patrols circling, keep radius small. She corrected a crooked menu letter with her glove as she passed. The M leaned again, Mel. Outside, laundry confessed sheet plus towel. Market passable, avoid fountain corner, and she adjusted her pace by grammar learned in chalk. Father R. waited for vespers in his chair with the professionalism of men who have forgiven worse. When he stood, he did it with peasant's slowness and saint's accuracy, palming the paper cone as if it were a benediction. I slid him a round loaf with triangle vents, cloister, and left it unglazed, no conversations at corners. He took the lane that smells like stone and hymns. At the door he blessed the timer, which is superstition and good practice. We staged clumsiness for the ones who had to remain. A spoon fell, move. A ladle rang the pot, delay. A knife laid flat on the board, go home. People obeyed what they thought was kitchen. The prefect's nephew ambled past the window, sniffing for meringues and trouble. We gave him both. He came in, ate sugar that collapses if you beat it past humility, and declared the town cultured. I offered him a brioche with a gloss that flattered his report. He asked about the club inspection tomorrow. I told him apples would be in season. He liked the sound of that, and left seeing fruit instead of routes. The postmistress handled paper as if it were weather. She misdelivered 2 sealed blanks into pockets that would need to wave doors open, one to the rail porter, one to a mother whose daughter would pass 3 questions if paper walked first. The brass weight traveled back to the spice stall inside the butcher's boy's cap. He wore it like a crown too heavy for a child, which is the only honest crown. When the tart cooled enough to obey, I cut 6 slices, 6 bodies in play, and left one to cool further. One must wait for later wind. I tucked a clean card beneath the plate nearest the alley. The man there would carry it to the corner and destroy it in a show of compliance if asked. In the fold, I had sewn dusk thread, roofs. He never looked. He did not need to. His hands already knew more grammar than cards. The timer sang, 3 short, 1 long, and chairs pushed back in the universal language of having eaten. Dishes clinked. Laughter made cover. Elise moved the white geranium 1 more finger left. Women only, now. And the room exhaled its men through the north door like a house refusing smoke. The women stacked plates and talked about laundry. Laundry is the most persuasive alibi in Europe. Feasts in with washing up. We washed a town. The boy with axle grease returned his empty hands like a confession accepted. He nodded once, quay clear. The tram conductor tapped his punch 2 more times at the corner. Roofs repeated. The postmistress scraped a crumb from the table and let it fall. 1 child can carry. The room, having performed celebration, performed absence. Empty chairs are a register. We balanced the account with saucers and thank yous. Then we paid the bill, not to officers, but to error. I left a wooden spoon on the floor at the wrong angle for a tidy woman. A dog will smell cinnamon that is not cinnamon, and we will need an alibi that looks human. I set the window sign to its usual accent and wiped the steam script away. I stacked the brioche pans where any man could see them and stored the danger where even brave men don't, under the boredom of onions. We sent the last women out with tails tucked on their twine and milk-glossed loaves that smell like obedience. One carried the brass weight back to the stall inside a sack of potatoes. Another carried the photograph Elise had made, wrapped in butcher's paper that apologized for meat it did not contain. The schoolmistress took the white geranium and left 3 red, grammar for tomorrow. Father R. would be counting roofs by now. He counts blessings after. In the alley, the boy lifted his bicycle and let the bell speak once. Market clear, and once again, mill after bells. I answered with the timer, 32, then 64. Redundancy is mercy for frightened feet. The rail porter limped more than he needs to when watched. Tonight he did not need to, and his stride forgot to lie. The laundry 2 doors down, sheet and towel, shifted to sheet only, square washed again. We adjusted not with panic, but with dishes. Dishes can explain any delay. When the street went thin, I opened the dead hob, slid in a paper cone that is not cinnamon, and closed it on a prayer that has more flour than faith. I took the last slice of tart, the one that had to cool longer, and wrapped it for the unknown very brave. He ate behind barrels behind the cooper, where tomorrow's inspection will begin. Men who eat after learn to live after. I left him a heel with 2 pinches of salt. 2 bodies may move, and the knowledge that the town writes verbs, not names. I made the ledger entry that lets sleep come. Feast held, routes eaten. Quay first, 2 widows, market second, schoolmistress, cloister by Father R, unglazed. Mills signaled by M. Roofs confirmed by hinge and bell. 6 moved, 1 delayed. Blanks waved doors. Boy counted. Dog sneezed once, vanilla holds. Interrogation residue reduced with steam. Pride cooled. Fear beaten but not overmixed. Tomorrow, Cooper inspected. Apples early, soup thick. Then I turned the timer to face the wall and let it forget it is a radio until morning. At the door, the prefect's nephew reappeared, late to his own vanity. He thanked me for a cultured evening and asked for a secret. I gave him 3. Cold butter, steady hands, no shortcuts. He left believing he had learned women. Behind him, the town's footsteps settled into the mathematics of survival. I washed the last bowl, set a loaf on the sill for whoever needs to be brave without witnesses, and blew out the flame. Yeast and silence took the watch. The ovens slept like animals that have earned it. The kitchen remembered how to be ordinary, which is the cleverest escape of all.